When a person comes to the end of their own strength, something supernatural begins to rise within them. There is a moment when the human heart realizes it cannot carry the burdens of life alone, and in that very surrender, God pours out a strength that is not of this world. When I surrender, God strengthens. When I release my fears, my anxieties, and as I continue to walk this journey of surrender, I discover that God's strength does not just arrive in a single moment, it grows with every step of obedience. Each time I release something, my pride, my fear, my doubts, His presence fills the empty space. It is like a holy wind breathing life into places that once felt dry and hopeless. The more I yield, the more I feel carried, as though invisible hands are lifting me above the storms that once overwhelmed me. There is something powerful about trusting God beyond what my eyes can see. When I surrender, I am not giving up, I am giving over. I am placing every part of my life into the hands of the one who created me, who knows my beginning and my end. This act of surrender is not weakness, it is spiritual courage. It is the courage that says, Lord, you know better than I do. Lead me, guide me, strengthen me. And in that humility, God releases a strength that transforms ordinary moments into miracles. Dr. Yonggi Cho often spoke about the power of coming before God with nothing but faith. He knew that when you strip away human pride, human logic, and human limitation, you create room for divine intervention. His life itself was a testimony that surrender is not a loss. It is an invitation for God to move. And when God moves, no darkness can remain, no fear can stay, no weakness can overpower the strength He imparts. I have learned that surrender is not a one-time prayer, it is a daily posture. Every morning when I wake up, I decide again to place my heart in God's hands. I decide to let Him take the lead. And every time I do, I feel a fresh strength rising within me, a strength that whispers, "You are not alone. I am with you." This strength calms storms inside before it calms the storms around. It brings peace to battles that no one else sees. It gives courage in moments when the flesh wants to run and hide. When I surrender my impatience, God gives me endurance. When I surrender my confusion, God gives me wisdom. When I surrender my frustrations, God gives me peace. This is the rhythm of divine exchange. This is the miracle of letting God be God in my life. There were moments when I thought surrender meant losing control, but I was wrong. Surrender means placing control into the hands of the one who knows exactly what He is doing. And when I look back, I see how God has strengthened me in ways I never expected. He strengthened me through seasons of waiting, teaching me to trust His timing. He strengthened me through seasons of pain, teaching me that healing flows from His presence. He strengthened me through seasons of uncertainty, showing me that His plan is always greater than my understanding. When I surrender my desire to rush ahead, He teaches me patience. When I surrender my need to be understood, He gives me a quiet confidence. When I surrender the weight of disappointment, He fills my heart with hope again. This is how God works. He takes what I cannot carry and replaces it with everything I truly need. Many people think strength comes from holding on tightly, but true strength comes from opening our hands. When I loosen my grip on what I cannot control, I discover that God is already there, ready to carry what was never meant for me in the first place. This is why surrender is powerful. It frees the heart from burdens that were never ours to bear. As I continue to surrender, I notice that God's strength not only lifts me, but also transforms me. It changes the way I think, the way I respond, the way I love. It softens places that were once hardened. It strengthens areas that were once fragile. It brings clarity where confusion once ruled. Surrender allows God to shape me into the person He intended me to be. When I surrender my doubts, He strengthens my faith until it stands firm even in the fire. When I surrender my brokenness, He strengthens my soul with a joy that does not depend on circumstances. When I surrender my fears, He strengthens my spirit with boldness that can only come from Him. And when I surrender my hurts, He strengthens my heart with a love that heals from the inside out. Dr. Yonggi Cho believed that when we surrender to the Holy Spirit, our lives begin to operate on a higher level. beyond what human strength could ever achieve. And I have seen this truth unfold in my own journey. God's strength enables me to walk through things that once would have crushed me. It empowers me to rise when everything tries to push me down. It gives me a resilience that does not come from personality or willpower, but from the Spirit of the living God dwelling within me. There are battles I thought would defeat me, yet they became the very places where God showed me His strength. There are prayers I thought were unanswered, yet they were preparing me for greater victories. There are seasons I thought were wasted, yet they became the chapters where God wrote His deepest lessons. When I surrendered, God strengthened every part of my life, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and even physically. Every weakness I bring before Him becomes a doorway for His power. Every tear becomes a seed for new strength. Every surrender becomes a step into a deeper relationship with Him. I learned that God does not strengthen me so I can rely on myself. He strengthens me so I can rely on Him even more. His strength does not make me independent. It makes me dependent on His unshakable presence. And in that dependence, I find freedom. In that surrender, I find purpose. In that yielding, I find strength greater than any storm, any fear, any doubt that tries to challenge me. God's strength is not temporary. It is not fragile. It does not fade. It does not weaken. It is steady, constant, and overflowing for all who surrender their lives into His hands. The more I surrender, the more I grow, not in pride, but in humility. Not in worry, but in peace. Not in self-reliance, but in God-reliance. And as I walk forward, I carry this truth in my heart. When I lay down my strength, He gives me His. When I lay down my plans, He shows me His. When I lay down my life, He breathes His life into me. This is the journey of surrender. This is the miracle of divine strength. This is how God transforms a weak vessel into a powerful testimony of His glory. And every day I surrender again, knowing that with every step, His strength becomes my strength and His power becomes my power. And as I continue to surrender, I begin to understand something deeper. That God does not simply strengthen me for the battles I can see, but also for the ones I cannot. There are moments when I feel a peace settle in my heart long before the circumstances change, and I know that this peace is not human. It is the result of surrender. When I release my grip on the things that trouble my soul, God fills that space with a strength that prepares me for what is ahead. It is almost as if surrender opens my inner eyes to see that I am never fighting alone. There is a gentle power that flows into the person who surrenders with trust. It is not loud. It is not forceful. It does not announce itself. But it grows quietly, steadily, until it becomes a mighty force on the inside. This is the strength that turns trembling hearts into courageous hearts. This is the strength that turns broken spirits into restored spirits. This is the strength that turns tears into testimonies. When I surrender, God is not just giving me strength. He is reshaping me from within, forming a spirit that reflects His own character. I begin to notice that surrender changes the atmosphere of my life. Worries lose their authority. Fear loses its voice. Doubt loses its power. The things that once weighed me down begin to fall away, not because the situation is easier, but because His strength within me is greater. I realize that life's challenges do not shrink, but my heart grows stronger under the hand of God. This is why surrender is powerful. It enlarges the soul to receive more of God's presence, and His presence becomes my strength. There are days when surrender feels simple, and days when it feels like a battle in itself. Some things are easy to release, while others cling tightly to the heart. But even in this struggle, God strengthens me. He does not reject me because I wrestle. He does not turn away because I hesitate. Instead, He patiently waits for me to place everything into His hands. And when I do, even if it is trembling, even if it is imperfect, He honors that surrender. He meets me with strength that lifts me higher than my weaknesses ever allowed me to stand. I think of how many times I tried to carry life on my own. How many nights I stayed awake worrying about things only God could fix. How many moments I allowed fear to whisper lies into my heart. But surrender silences those lies. Surrender reminds me that God is sovereign and I am safe in His care. When I surrender my fear, God strengthens my faith. When I surrender my worry, God strengthens my peace. When I surrender my pain, God strengthens my hope. This is the divine exchange that transforms ordinary people into vessels of extraordinary strength. Dr. Yonggi Cho often taught that faith grows strongest in the soil of surrender. He knew that when a person kneels before God in absolute trust, heaven opens over their life. He understood that miracles are not born from human effort, but from divine surrender. And I feel that truth echoing in my own walk. The more I yield, the more I feel the supernatural touch of God. The more I let go, the more He lifts me. The more I give up my dependence on the world, the more He becomes my anchor. Surrender also teaches me to listen. When I stop clinging to my own plans, my ears become sensitive to His voice. God begins to speak into areas where I once shut Him out. He gives direction where I once walked blindly. He gives correction where I once resisted. And each time I respond, His strength grows in me. He strengthens my obedience, my confidence, my spiritual vision. I begin to see not just with natural sight, but with faith. Faith that knows God is working even when I cannot trace His hand. And in those moments when disappointment tries to crush the heart, surrender becomes a shield. It protects me from bitterness. It guards me from hopelessness. It reminds me that God sees what I cannot see, and He knows what I cannot know. When I surrender disappointment, He strengthens me with endurance. When I surrender expectations that did not unfold as I hoped, He strengthens me with trust that He still has a better plan. This strength allows me to walk forward without losing heart. I also find that surrender softens my character. It removes pride, quiets ego, and humbles the soul. When God strengthens a surrendered heart, that heart becomes more compassionate, more patient, more loving. I start to reflect His nature rather than my own impulses. I start to respond with grace instead of anger. I start to love with a purity that only God can produce. This, too, is strength. Strength that is not loud or dramatic, but steady and transformative. There are battles on the inside that no one else sees. Battles of insecurity, battles of doubt, battles of past wounds. And I have learned that these battles can only be won through surrender. When I surrender my insecurities, God strengthens my identity in Him. When I surrender my past, He strengthens my future. When I surrender the voices that try to weaken my soul, He strengthens me with truth that sets me free. It is in these hidden moments of surrender that the deepest strength is formed. As surrender becomes a rhythm in my life, I begin to walk differently. I face challenges with a quiet confidence, knowing that God is my strength. I face uncertainties with a calm spirit, knowing that God holds my tomorrow. I face spiritual battles with boldness, knowing that the power of God is greater than anything that comes against me. Nothing compares to the strength God releases into a heart that fully trusts Him. Surrender is not about losing myself. It is about discovering who I truly am in God. It is about letting go of who I was so I can become who He designed me to be. And with every layer I surrender, His strength fills the empty spaces until all that remains is a heart strengthened by grace, empowered by His Spirit, and anchored in His love. This journey of surrender continues every day, step by step, breath by breath. And with each surrender, God strengthens me more, shaping me, guiding me, lifting me, and preparing me for everything He has destined for my life. And as I continue to surrender, I realize that God's strength is not only for the storms I can see, but also for the ones I cannot. There are battles hidden deep in the soul, struggles that no one else can touch, and it is in those secret places that surrender becomes the most powerful. When I release my fears, my doubts, my insecurities into His hands, He fills the emptiness with courage that cannot be measured by human standards. He replaces worry with peace, weakness with power, and confusion with clarity. I begin to understand that every moment of surrender is an invitation for God to show Himself strong on my behalf. There is a strange kind of freedom that comes when I let go. I do not have to pretend. I do not have to carry burdens that were never meant for me. I do not have to struggle with forces that are beyond my control. When I surrender, God carries the weight. When I surrender, His Spirit rises within me and equips me to face challenges I never thought I could overcome. His strength becomes a shield around my mind, a support under my spirit, and a fire that ignites my faith. Each act of surrender, no matter how small, creates a ripple of supernatural power that transforms my life. Sometimes surrender feels uncomfortable because it requires trust beyond what my natural understanding allows. It requires faith when I cannot see the full path. It requires patience when I want immediate results. It requires humility when pride wants to take control. But these are the very moments when God's strength becomes most evident. The more I release, the more I receive. The more I yield, the more I am filled with His power. It is not a strength that depends on my ability, but a strength that depends on His promise. I have learned that surrender is not a single moment of prayer. It is a daily choice, an ongoing lifestyle. Each day presents new challenges, new fears, new opportunities to let go of control and trust God's guidance. Each day I surrender my thoughts, my plans, my desires, and He strengthens me in ways I cannot even describe. When I wake in the morning, I remind myself this day is not mine to control, but it is His to lead. And in that simple act of surrender, a supernatural energy fills my spirit, equipping me to face everything ahead with faith instead of fear. There is a divine exchange in surrender, my weakness for His strength, my limitations for His power, my anxiety for His peace. I have discovered that the more I release, the more God can work through me. I have discovered that my natural strength is fleeting, but His strength is eternal. I have discovered that true courage is not the ability to face life alone, but the willingness to lean entirely on God. And as I walk this path, I notice that my heart grows stronger, my faith grows deeper, and my life begins to reflect a power far greater than my own. Dr. David Yonggi Cho often spoke about the power of the Holy Spirit operating in a surrendered life. He knew that when a person is empty of self-reliance, God's Spirit fills that emptiness with an unstoppable force. I have felt this truth repeatedly. Surrender opens the door for miracles, for restoration, for divine strength. It is when I am at my weakest that I feel His power the strongest. It is when I am completely dependent that I become fully equipped. Human effort alone cannot achieve what God can accomplish through a surrendered heart. Surrender also teaches patience, because God's timing is perfect even when mine is not. It teaches perseverance, because His strength sustains me even in the longest trials. It teaches humility, because His glory is revealed most when I am weakest. Every challenge becomes a classroom where God teaches me the power of yielding, where He reminds me that His strength is made perfect in my weakness. And as I learn these lessons, I begin to move through life with a quiet confidence, a faith that does not waver, and a courage that cannot be shaken. When I surrender my past, I am strengthened to embrace my future. When I surrender my pain, I am strengthened to heal others. When I surrender my disappointments, I am strengthened to see God's plan unfold. There is a rhythm in surrender, a flow that invites God to work in and through me in ways that surpass my understanding. I have discovered that surrender is not passive. It is an active trust, a conscious decision to place my life fully into the hands of the one who loves me most. Even in moments of fear, surrender produces strength. Even in moments of uncertainty, surrender produces clarity. Even in moments of weakness, surrender produces courage. I have learned that God's power is not only enough, it is overflowing. And the more I release, the more I am filled, until there is no room for despair, no room for doubt, no room for fear. God's strength becomes the very rhythm of my life, guiding every step, sustaining every breath, and energizing every decision. Surrender transforms ordinary people into vessels of extraordinary power. It changes the way I respond to trials, the way I love, the way I persevere. It brings a light into the darkness that is unstoppable. It gives hope to the hopeless, courage to the fearful, and peace to the troubled heart. When I surrender, God's strength does not just touch me. It flows through me, impacting everyone around me, touching lives in ways I cannot see, but can witness over time. There is a remarkable beauty in surrender because it aligns my will with God's will. It harmonizes my heart with His heart. It opens my spirit to a depth of intimacy with Him that cannot be attained by effort alone. And in this intimacy, I find strength because God's presence is life-giving, empowering, and unshakable. When I surrender fully, I become a living testimony of His power, a vessel carrying His light, His hope, and His strength into a world that desperately needs it. Every day, I am reminded that surrender is a path, not a destination. It is a journey that shapes my character, refines my faith, and enlarges my capacity to receive God's strength. Every trial becomes an opportunity to release control, every challenge an invitation to trust, every setback a reason to rely on His power. And through it all, I see that God is faithful. His strength never diminishes, never falters, and never fails. Surrender is the key that unlocks the full measure of God's power. It teaches dependence, produces resilience, and reveals the supernatural working in a life that chooses Him over self. I have learned that true strength is never about how much I can endure on my own. It is about how much I can yield to God and allow Him to carry me through. When I surrender, His strength rises within me like a river, steady, unending, and unstoppable. And even when the world seems heavy, even when burdens press from every side, surrender allows me to stand firm. Even when my heart feels weak, surrender allows me to rise strong. Even when my spirit feels small, surrender allows me to be filled with His boundless power. The more I surrender, the more I discover that God's strength is limitless, surpassing all understanding, and available to all who are willing to release their lives into His hands. When I surrender my pride, He strengthens my humility. When I surrender my anger, He strengthens my patience. When I surrender my control, He strengthens my trust. This is the beauty of surrender. It is not a loss. It is the gateway to the fullness of God's power in my life. It is the path to a life that overcomes, a spirit that thrives, and a heart that is anchored in the unshakable love of God. And in this surrender, I find that every weakness becomes a platform for His strength. Every fear becomes an opportunity for His courage. Every brokenness becomes a canvas for His glory. Every limitation becomes a stage for His power. The more I release, the more He fills me. The more I trust, the more He empowers me. The more I surrender, the more I am strengthened in ways that words cannot fully describe, yet the heart can fully experience. The journey of surrender is ongoing, ever deepening, ever strengthening. And with each moment, I am reminded that the God who strengthens me is faithful, unchanging, and limitless. My weakness is the invitation for His strength. My inability is the doorway for His power. My surrender is the catalyst for a life that is extraordinary, empowered, and fully alive in Him. When I look back at this journey of surrender, I see a truth that cannot be denied. True strength does not come from what we can do on our own, but from what God can do through a heart fully yielded to Him. Every fear we release, every burden we lay down, every moment we choose trust over control becomes a doorway for His power to flow. Surrender is not weakness. It is the ultimate demonstration of faith. It is in letting go that we are lifted. It is in admitting our insufficiency that His sufficiency is revealed. And it is in yielding our lives completely to God that we discover a strength that is unstoppable, unshakable, and eternal. When we surrender, God does not just strengthen us. He transforms us, equips us, and empowers us to rise above every circumstance, fulfilling the extraordinary destiny He has planned for us. The message is clear: your strength begins the moment you surrender.